For centuries, billions of people have placed their absolute faith in the Bible, believing its words to be the direct message from God. But in the shadows of history lies a startling truth that has been hidden from most believers. In 1945, archaeologists made a groundbreaking discovery in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, ancient biblical manuscripts that revealed significant differences from modern versions. This wasn't an isolated find. Throughout the 20th century, scholars examining the oldest surviving biblical texts have uncovered numerous discrepancies that challenge our understanding of Scripture. These aren't minor variations in punctuation or spelling. They are fundamental differences in meaning that have shaped core Christian doctrines. From concepts of salvation to descriptions of the divine, many of the beliefs we hold today may have evolved from mistranslations and alterations made centuries ago. The evidence lies not just in ancient scrolls, but in the living tradition of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which has preserved texts that others chose to erase. What we're about to reveal isn't speculation, it's the result of decades of meticulous research by biblical scholars who have dedicated their lives to understanding the original texts. Today, we'll uncover 3 of the most profound mistranslations that have shaped Christianity for generations. These aren't just academic discoveries. They touch the very heart of what millions believe about salvation, divine nature, and human purpose. We'll examine how simple word choices by translators transformed concepts of hell, changed our understanding of Christ's birth, and altered how we see ourselves in relation to the divine. Through ancient manuscripts, historical records, and the preserved traditions of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, we'll trace how these changes occurred and why they matter. Each revelation challenges not just what we believe, but why we believe it. This journey of discovery requires an open mind and the courage to question long-held beliefs. For many, the revelations we'll explore may feel unsettling at first. They challenge narratives that have been taught from pulpits for centuries. Consider the implications. What if the concepts of eternal punishment that have shaped Christian theology were based on mistranslations? What if our understanding of divine birth has been influenced by linguistic choices made by ancient scribes? What if the very way we view our relationship with the divine has been altered by translation decisions? These aren't just academic questions. They affect how millions of people understand their faith, their purpose, and their relationship with God. Through careful examination of original texts and preserved traditions, we'll see how subtle changes in translation have profound implications for modern belief. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world, has preserved texts that offer a different perspective, one that may be closer to the original message. Their preservation of ancient manuscripts provides a unique window into early Christian thought and practice. Before we begin this exploration, remember, understanding these changes doesn't diminish faith, it enriches it by bringing us closer to the original teachings. Understanding how the Bible reached its current form requires us to trace a complex journey through history. The original texts were written in ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, languages with nuances and cultural contexts vastly different from modern English. The first major translation occurred in the 3rd century BCE, when Jewish scholars translated the Hebrew scriptures into Greek, creating the Septuagint. This translation alone introduced significant changes as Greek concepts were used to express Hebrew ideas. By the 4th century CE, as Christianity spread through the Roman Empire, St. Jerome undertook the monumental task of translating the Bible into Latin. This version, known as the Vulgate, became the standard text for over 1,000 years. Jerome himself acknowledged the difficulty of capturing precise meanings across languages. Throughout medieval times, manuscripts were hand-copied by monks who sometimes introduced variations. The invention of printing brought standardization, but also solidified certain interpretations. When King James commissioned his English translation in 1611, the translators worked from multiple sources, including Latin texts already separated from the original languages by multiple translations. Each step in this process involved crucial decisions about how to interpret and express ancient concepts in new languages. The challenges of biblical translation extend far beyond simple word conversion. Ancient Hebrew, for instance, often carried multiple meanings for single words, forcing translators to choose one interpretation over others. Cultural concepts familiar to ancient audiences, but foreign to later readers, required explanation or substitution. Take the Hebrew word ruach. It can mean wind, breath, or spirit. When translating passages containing this word, scribes had to decide which meaning to emphasize, potentially altering the text's original implications. Similar challenges arose with words describing familial relationships, measurements, and abstract concepts. Political pressures also influenced translations. When the Bible was translated into English under King James, translators were instructed to support the authority of the Church of England. Their word choices often reflected these institutional priorities. Geographical and cultural distances created additional complications. References to local customs, plants, and animals sometimes had no direct equivalents in target languages. Translators had to choose between maintaining literal accuracy and ensuring reader comprehension. Even today, scholars continue discovering nuances in ancient texts that reveal how early translation choices shaped modern interpretations. The Dead Sea Scrolls and other archaeological findings have exposed gaps between original meanings and traditional translations. Perhaps no translation choice has had a more profound impact on Christian theology than the concept of hell. The modern image of hell as a place of eternal torment differs dramatically from what ancient biblical texts actually described. In the original Hebrew scriptures, the word Sheol was used to describe the afterlife. It simply meant the grave or the place of the dead, a shadowy realm where all souls went after death, regardless of their moral standing. This was not a place of punishment, but rather a state of rest or sleep. When Greek translators encountered Sheol, they often used the word Hades, drawing from their own cultural understanding of the underworld. This began the transformation of the concept. Later, Latin translations used infernum, further shifting the meaning toward a place of punishment. Jesus, speaking in Aramaic and quoted in Greek, used the word Gehenna when discussing judgment. Gehenna was actually a physical place, the Valley of Hinnom outside Jerusalem. Once a site of pagan sacrifice, it had become a garbage dump where fires burned constantly. Jesus used this familiar location as a metaphor for destruction, not eternal torment. The transformation continued through medieval times when Norse and Anglo-Saxon concepts of the underworld influenced translations. The English word hell itself comes from the Germanic Hel, the name of both a Norse goddess and her underground realm. The Ethiopian Bible preserves a different understanding, closer to the original Hebrew concept. Its texts speak more of purification and restoration than eternal punishment. This raises profound questions about how this mistranslation has shaped Christian doctrine and the way believers understand divine justice. The doctrine of the virgin birth, central to Christian theology, presents another compelling case of how translation choices shaped religious understanding. At its heart lies the translation of a single Hebrew word that transformed a prophecy's meaning. In Isaiah 7:14, the Hebrew text uses the word Alma to describe the woman who would bear a child. Alma simply meant young woman or maiden in ancient Hebrew usage. If the writer had specifically meant to indicate virginity, the word Betula would have been the clear choice. This distinction becomes crucial when examining the historical context. Isaiah was speaking to King Ahaz about a sign that would occur in his own time, the birth of a child to a young woman. However, when the text was translated into Greek in the Septuagint, Alma became Parthenos, a word that could mean either young woman or virgin. By the time of Latin translations, Parthenos was rendered as Virgo, specifically meaning virgin. This interpretation then carried forward into English translations, cementing the connection between Isaiah's prophecy and the virgin birth of Jesus. The Ethiopian Bible's preservation of earlier texts reveals how this understanding evolved. While not denying the virgin birth of Jesus as described in the Gospels, it shows that the Isaiah prophecy originally carried a different immediate meaning for its audience. This translation choice had far-reaching effects beyond theology. It influenced Christian views on marriage, sexuality, and the role of women in society. The elevation of virginity as a spiritual ideal stems partly from this linguistic shift, shaping monastic traditions and cultural values for centuries. The phrase, "made in the image of God" from Genesis 1:26, has profoundly shaped human self-understanding, but its original meaning differs significantly from modern interpretations. The Hebrew phrase, "B'Tselem Elohim," carried specific cultural and political implications that were lost in translation. In ancient Near Eastern culture, the concept of being in a God's image was primarily royal language. Kings were considered the image-bearers of deities, representing divine authority on earth. When Genesis declared all humans were made in God's image, it made a revolutionary statement about human dignity and worth. The original Hebrew text uses concrete terms related to representation and rulership. This wasn't about physical appearance, but about humanity's role as God's representatives on earth. However, when translated into Greek, these concrete concepts became more abstract and philosophical. The Greek translation introduced Platonic concepts of form and essence, shifting the meaning towards spiritual and intellectual qualities. Latin translations further emphasized this philosophical interpretation, moving away from the practical, royal meaning of the original text. The Ethiopian Bible preserves interpretations that better reflect the original context. Its texts emphasize the practical implications of being God's image bearers. The responsibility to represent divine authority through justice and care for creation. This mistranslation had significant historical consequences. While the original text challenged ancient power structures by declaring all humans divine image bearers, later interpretations were sometimes used to justify hierarchy and oppression. The shift from concrete representation to abstract similarity changed how people understood their relationship with both God and creation. Understanding the original meaning restores a sense of purpose and responsibility to the concept, emphasizing action and representation over mere resemblance. The contrast between the Ethiopian Bible and the King James Version reveals much about how political and cultural forces shaped biblical texts. While the King James Version contains 66 books, the Ethiopian Bible preserves 88 books, including texts considered sacred by early Christians. The King James Bible, commissioned in 1611, emerged from specific political and religious circumstances. King James I wanted a translation that would unite different Christian factions in England, while reinforcing church and state authority. The translators worked under strict guidelines that influenced their word choices and interpretations. The Ethiopian Bible, by contrast, represents a tradition largely untouched by European political considerations. Its translation history traces back to ancient Ge'ez versions that preceded the medieval European translations by centuries. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved these texts through generations of scribes who maintained earlier interpretations. Key differences appear in how the two versions handle prophetic texts, descriptions of divine interactions, and accounts of early Christian history. Where the King James Version often smooths out complexities to present a unified narrative, the Ethiopian Bible retains more of the textual diversity found in early Christianity. Among the most striking differences between these biblical traditions are the books present in the Ethiopian Bible, but absent from the King James Version. These include texts that were widely read and respected in early Christian communities. The Book of Enoch, perhaps the most significant of these texts, was quoted in the New Testament's Book of Jude. It contains detailed accounts of angelic beings, prophetic visions, and teachings about divine justice that influenced early Christian thought. The Book of Jubilees, sometimes called Little Genesis, provides expanded narratives of Genesis stories and was considered authoritative by many early Christians. It offers detailed chronologies and additional context for biblical events. Other significant texts include the Shepherd of Hermas, once considered scripture by many early churches, and various books of Maccabees beyond those found in Catholic Bibles. Each of these texts provides insights into how early Christians understood their faith. The Ethiopian Church preserved these books not as historical curiosities, but as living scripture. Their continued use in Ethiopian Christianity offers a window into how early Christians might have understood and practiced their faith. Ethiopia's unique role in preserving biblical texts stems from its early adoption of Christianity and its independence from European church authority. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, established in the 4th century CE, maintained direct links to early Christian traditions. Unlike other African and Middle Eastern Christian communities that later fell under Muslim or European control, Ethiopia remained largely independent. This allowed its church to preserve ancient practices and texts without external pressure to conform to Western standards. The conversion of Ethiopia traces back to the biblical account in Acts, where Philip baptized an Ethiopian court official. This early connection to Christianity gave Ethiopian scribes and scholars a central role in preserving and transmitting biblical texts. Ethiopian monasteries became centers of manuscript preservation, with skilled scribes copying texts in Ge'ez, the ancient liturgical language. These centers maintained traditions of interpretation and understanding that differed from those developing in Europe. The Ethiopian Church's preservation efforts weren't just about maintaining documents. They preserved an entire approach to understanding Scripture, one that reflected earlier Christian perspectives and practices. The Book of Enoch represents one of the most significant texts preserved in the Ethiopian Bible that was excluded from Western versions. Its importance is evidenced by its influence on early Christian thought and its quotation in the New Testament's Book of Jude. Written in several stages between the 3rd century BCE and the 1st century CE, the book tells the story of Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah, who, according to Genesis, walked with God. The text describes his heavenly journeys and divine revelations, providing detailed accounts of angels, cosmic order, and divine judgment. The book begins with Enoch's visions of fallen angels who taught humanity forbidden knowledge. These angels, called Watchers, married human women and produced giant offspring. The resulting corruption led to divine judgment, a theme that parallels the Great Flood narrative. Beyond these dramatic narratives, the Book of Enoch contains sophisticated theological concepts. It describes a complex heavenly hierarchy, presents detailed prophecies, and explores ideas about divine justice and human responsibility. Its teachings about the Messiah influenced early Christian understanding of Jesus' role. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved this text as scripture, while other Christian traditions excluded it during the formation of their biblical canons. Through Ethiopian preservation, we can understand how early Christians viewed cosmic order, divine justice, and the relationship between heaven and earth. The Book of Jubilees, also known as Little Genesis, provides an expanded retelling of events from creation to Moses. Preserved in the Ethiopian Bible, this text offers crucial insights into how early religious communities understood their sacred history. Written in the 2nd century BCE, Jubilees presents a detailed chronological framework based on cycles of 49 years called Jubilees. It claims to be direct revelation to Moses on Mount Sinai, recorded by angels, offering additional details about stories found in Genesis and Exodus. The text provides elaborate explanations for biblical events. It describes how Abraham learned to worship the true God, gives detailed accounts of the patriarchs' lives, and explains why certain laws and customs were established. For instance, it offers extensive background about why Jacob received the birthright instead of Esau. Jubilees emphasizes the importance of maintaining religious calendar and festivals, presenting them as eternally ordained celebrations that connect human events with heavenly order. It explains how sacred times were revealed to humanity and why their observance matters. The Ethiopian Church's preservation of Jubilees offers valuable insights into early Jewish and Christian understanding of sacred history. Its detailed chronology and explanations show how ancient communities understood their relationship with divine law and cosmic order. Beyond Enoch and Jubilees, the Ethiopian Bible preserves several other significant texts that offer unique insights into early Christian thought and practice. The Shepherd of Hermas, once widely read in early churches, contains visions and moral teachings presented through allegories. Written in Rome around the 2nd century CE, it provides detailed guidance about Christian life and church organization. Its exclusion from Western canons marked a shift in how churches understood Scripture. Additional books of Maccabees expand on Jewish history between the Old and New Testaments. These texts detail struggles for religious freedom and cultural identity, themes that resonated deeply with Ethiopian Christians maintaining their traditions. The Ascension of Isaiah describes visions of heaven and prophecies about Christ, offering unique perspectives on early Christian understanding of Jesus' divine nature. Its preservation in Ethiopia helps scholars understand how early Christians viewed prophecy and divine revelation. The Ethiopian Bible also includes various prayers and liturgical texts considered scripture, showing how early Christians integrated worship practices with biblical texts. These materials reveal a Christianity more diverse in its expressions than often recognized. The Council of Nicaea in 325 CE marked a pivotal moment in determining which texts would be considered authoritative in Western Christianity. Convened by Emperor Constantine, this gathering of church leaders sought to establish uniformity in Christian doctrine and practice. Before Nicaea, Christian communities across the Roman Empire used various collections of texts in their worship and teaching. The Ethiopian Church, existing beyond Roman authority, maintained its broader collection of scriptures without interference from these decisions. The council's decisions went beyond purely religious considerations. Constantine wanted Christianity to help unite his empire, requiring a standardized version of the faith. Church leaders debated which texts best supported Orthodox doctrine, often favoring those that reinforced ecclesiastical authority. During this period, many texts widely read in early Christian communities began to be set aside. Books that contained complex mystical teachings or challenged developing church hierarchy received particular scrutiny. The process of determining which texts would be considered scripture continued long after Nicaea, but this council established key principles for text selection. Significantly, the Ethiopian Church remained unaffected by these decisions, allowing it to preserve texts that other Christian traditions gradually lost or rejected. The shaping of biblical texts was deeply intertwined with political power. As Christianity became the Roman Empire's official religion, religious decisions increasingly reflected political needs. Church leaders worked to create versions of texts that would support institutional authority. Passages that might encourage questioning of church hierarchy or political power received careful scrutiny. Translations often reflected the interests of those in power rather than purely theological concerns. During the medieval period, access to biblical texts was strictly controlled. The Church maintained its authority partly by keeping scripture in Latin, a language most people couldn't read. Those who attempted to translate the Bible into common languages often faced severe persecution. This political influence extended beyond text selection to interpretation. Official readings of Scripture typically supported existing power structures, while alternative interpretations were often branded as heretical. The Ethiopian Church's independence from these political pressures allowed it to maintain different interpretations. The creation of the King James Bible in 1611 represents another crucial moment where political power shaped Scripture. King James I of England commissioned this translation to unify competing religious factions and strengthen both church and state authority. The translators worked under strict guidelines that reflected political priorities. They were instructed to support the structure of the Church of England and ensure translations aligned with established church government. Words and phrases were carefully chosen to reinforce royal authority. Though renowned for its literary beauty, the King James Version reflects these political influences. Its translators relied heavily on earlier Latin translations, rather than working directly from the oldest available Hebrew and Greek texts. They also excluded books that earlier Christian communities had considered scripture. This translation became the standard English Bible, shaping how generations understood Christianity. Its influence extends far beyond religious practice into English literature and culture. The connection between Jesus and Africa runs deeper than many realize. The biblical narrative places significant events of Jesus' life in direct connection with Africa, particularly Egypt and North Africa. According to Matthew's Gospel, Jesus spent his early years as a refugee in Egypt, where his family fled to escape King Herod's persecution. This African sojourn places Jesus within Egyptian culture during his formative years, a fact often overlooked in traditional retellings. During Jesus' ministry, people from North Africa played significant roles. Simon of Cyrene, from modern-day Libya, carried Jesus' cross to Calvary. The Gospel of Mark mentions this event, highlighting the involvement of African people in crucial moments of Christian history. The Ethiopian eunuch's conversion, recorded in Acts, demonstrates early Christianity's spread into Africa. This high-ranking Ethiopian official became one of the first recorded Gentile converts, taking Christianity back to the Horn of Africa. These connections challenge the common portrayal of Jesus and early Christianity as exclusively Middle Eastern or European phenomena. The Ethiopian Bible's preservation of these narratives helps maintain awareness of Christianity's African connections. Ethiopia's role in early Christianity is both unique and significant. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, established in the 4th century CE, represents one of the oldest continuous Christian traditions in the world. According to Ethiopian tradition, Christianity reached their land through the Ethiopian eunuch mentioned in Acts. The official conversion of Ethiopia occurred under King Ezana, making Ethiopia one of the first Christian kingdoms in history. Ethiopian monasteries became centers of biblical scholarship, preserving ancient manuscripts and traditions. Skilled scribes maintained texts in gaze, keeping alive interpretations and understandings that predated many Western Christian traditions. The Ethiopian Church maintained independence when many other ancient Christian communities fell under foreign control. This independence allowed Ethiopia to preserve its unique biblical tradition, including texts and interpretations that disappeared elsewhere. Today, Ethiopia's ancient churches, like the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, stand as testament to this enduring Christian heritage. The colonial era profoundly impacted how Christianity was understood and practiced across Africa. While Ethiopia maintained its independence and religious traditions, other regions saw their Christian heritage reshaped by European influence. European missionaries often presented Christianity as a Western religion, overlooking or dismissing its ancient African roots. Traditional religious texts and practices were frequently replaced with European interpretations. The portrayal of Jesus and biblical figures through European art and imagery became standard, creating a disconnect between Christianity's Middle Eastern and African origins and its colonial presentation. Western biblical translations often reflected European cultural values rather than original meanings. This influenced how converts understood their faith and their relationship to Christian history. Ethiopia's resistance to colonization allowed it to maintain its traditional Christian understanding, preserving an alternative to the European interpretation of Christianity. This preservation offers important insights into how Christianity was understood before colonial influence. The exclusion of the Ethiopian Bible from mainstream Christian discourse was driven by both political and religious motivations. Western religious authorities had compelling reasons to maintain their version of biblical texts as the sole authority. The Ethiopian Bible's broader collection of texts presented theological perspectives that sometimes challenged established Western doctrine. Its preservation of books like Enoch and Jubilees offered alternative views on angels, prophecy, and divine justice that didn't align with Western theological developments. Political considerations also played a crucial role. The Ethiopian Church's independence from Rome and Constantinople demonstrated that Christian authority could exist outside European control. This challenged the notion that true Christianity required submission to Western religious leadership. The Ethiopian Bible's preservation of early Christian diversity threatened the idea of a single, unified Christian tradition controlled from Europe. Its texts showed how early Christianity encompassed various interpretations and practices that later Western authorities sought to standardize. Moreover, the Ethiopian tradition's direct links to early Christianity, predating many European developments, challenged assumptions about the necessity of European oversight for authentic Christian practice. The control of biblical texts represented a significant source of religious and political power. Western church authorities maintained their influence partly through controlling which scriptures were considered authentic and how they were interpreted. The existence of the Ethiopian Bible challenged this control in several ways. Its preservation of additional texts demonstrated that respected Christian communities had historically used a broader collection of scriptures. This undermined claims about the necessity and antiquity of the Western biblical canon. Ethiopian Christianity's independence also provided an example of authentic tradition outside European control. This challenged the authority of Western religious institutions to determine Orthodox Christian practice. The Ethiopian Church's direct connection to early Christianity, maintained through centuries of independent development, offered alternative perspectives on how early Christians understood and practiced their faith. This threatened the idea that Western Christianity represented the only authentic interpretation of biblical tradition. The suppression of the Ethiopian Bible's broader tradition continues to impact modern Christianity. Many believers remain unaware of these ancient texts and their significance for understanding early Christian thought. This limited awareness affects how Christians understand their faith's history and diversity. The dominance of Western biblical traditions has created a narrower view of Christianity than actually existed in its early centuries. The Ethiopian Bible's preservation reveals how political and religious decisions shaped which texts became considered scripture. This raises important questions about how modern believers understand biblical authority and interpretation. Recognition of the Ethiopian tradition's antiquity and authenticity challenges assumptions about Christianity's development. It demonstrates how ancient Christian communities understood their faith differently from later Western interpretations. These insights are particularly relevant as Christianity becomes increasingly global, encouraging renewed appreciation for diverse Christian traditions. The journey through the Ethiopian Bible and its differences from Western traditions reveals several crucial insights about Christian history and biblical texts. We've seen how translation choices shaped fundamental Christian concepts, from understandings of the afterlife to interpretations of divine imagery. The preservation of additional books in the Ethiopian Bible shows how early Christianity encompassed a broader range of texts and interpretations. The Ethiopian Church's maintenance of ancient traditions demonstrates Christianity's deep roots in Africa, challenging European-centered narratives of Christian history. Their preservation of texts excluded from Western canons provides valuable insights into early Christian thought and practice. Political and religious influences shaped which texts became considered scripture in Western traditions, while Ethiopia's independence allowed it to maintain older collections of sacred texts. This history raises important questions about how we understand biblical authority and interpretation today. Understanding these historical developments invites us to engage more deeply with biblical texts and their history. The Ethiopian Bible's preservation of ancient traditions offers opportunities to broaden our understanding of early Christianity. Exploring these texts doesn't diminish faith, but enriches it by revealing Christianity's historical depth and diversity. The Ethiopian tradition shows how ancient Christian communities understood and practiced their faith. The differences between Ethiopian and Western biblical traditions remind us that Scripture's history is complex and worthy of careful study. Each tradition preserves important aspects of Christian heritage. This knowledge calls us to approach biblical texts with both reverence and understanding of their historical development. It encourages appreciation for how different Christian communities have preserved and interpreted sacred texts through the centuries. Modern believers can benefit from understanding these various traditions while maintaining their own faith commitments. The Ethiopian Bible stands as a testament to Christianity's rich and diverse heritage. Its preservation of ancient texts and traditions enriches our understanding of early Christian faith and practice. As we study these differences between Ethiopian and Western biblical traditions, we gain deeper appreciation for how Christian communities have maintained their sacred texts through history. This knowledge doesn't challenge faith, but deepens it through better understanding of Christianity's historical development. The Ethiopian Church's faithful preservation of these ancient traditions reminds us that Christianity's roots extend beyond European interpretations, encompassing diverse expressions of faith that continue to offer insights today. If today's exploration of the Ethiopian Bible has sparked your interest or challenged your understanding, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your perspective in the comments below. What surprised you most about this ancient tradition? Don't miss our upcoming investigations into hidden religious histories. Subscribe to our channel to join us as we continue uncovering forgotten spiritual traditions and ancient wisdom. If you found this information valuable, help others discover it too. Share this video with friends and family who might appreciate these insights into early Christianity. And remember to hit the like button if this content resonated with you. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeking truth.